To our report section, I do want to remind everyone that until the end of the school year, it is the requirement of the Fargo School District that persons in the buildings of Fargo Public Schools do adhere to the mitigation practices that staff and students have been asked to adhere to. So that includes those of us in this room tonight as well. Appreciate everyone that has decided to do that, including wearing a mask. On to our reports. The first report is our Equity and Inclusion Department report. Dr. Usselman is here. Welcome.
Turn on the microphone. So, I have old teacher lungs. I think I could have shouted it out. So, again, I'm Tamara, and I'll begin with defining diversity, equity, and inclusion in a really simple form, but context matters, and this is how we use it at Fargo Public Schools. So diversity means count the people. Count everybody in our school system. Like I said, people who look like me, our 88 culturally, linguistically diverse student groups, and yet it means more than race, ethnicity. It's gender and gender identification. It's socioeconomic status. 29% of our students are on federally supported meals, and so that implies some things about what we need to know to help all kids achieve the mission. Diversity includes disability, or how people are abled, and a lot of intersectionality across those things. That's diversity. It's all of us. What is inclusion? Inclusion is this belief that the people count. All the people count. Each of us will fall into demographic groups that I mentioned and even ones I didn't mention, but each of us wants to be known by face and name. So we are more than a label. We are someone's human child or someone's significant other and a person of worth in our own right. So then if that's diversity and that's inclusion, what is equity? Sometimes people think equity can just be defined by love. And I'll tell you, love is in the sticker price of being an educator. You gotta love your kids, all of them. You gotta love your school system and your community to want to make it continuously improve. But equity is actually measured by parity in outcomes. And I'll talk about what that means because I think it will help you understand what equity really means in this system. Now, it might mean something different in other systems, but this is our context here. So in parity in outcomes, it really means, when I mentioned socioeconomic status, if almost 30% of our students receive federally subsidized meals, we want to make certain that our students still achieve great things and that we see those students in advanced placement and rigorous coursework and in the school play and in band and taking extracurricular activities. We want to make certain that we have parity, for example, in our behavior reports. Students shouldn't be overrepresented in suspension and underrepresented in awards. If that's happening, then we have some work to do in terms of teaching lagging skills, as well as making certain our school system is included. So, on slide 1, what does educational equity look like? If you take a look at this, you'll understand how we use the term equity. So we believe it looks like authentic, caring relationships, pedagogy, meaning curriculum, resources, and teaching that allows me to be who I am in all of those groups we mentioned, that we hold high expectations for every student to meet their grade level expectations and graduate on time. It means parity in enrollment in those advanced courses like I talked about. It means a curriculum that is reflective and adaptive, so if you took mathematics and didn't learn it, we have a way to go back and scoop you in to make certain that you do achieve and graduate on time. It means that our school environments are welcoming and safe. Safety is a big deal in equity. And that we have system-wide outcomes that contribute to a more just community, and I'll talk about what that means in a minute. So what does educational equity sound like? When we keep improving our equity, our students will start to say, in this school system, I'm seen for my strengths and my contributions. I'm known by face and name. I have strengths, I have contributions, I'm respected for who I am. My voice is heard and appreciated, I feel cared about, and I care about other people. I see myself represented in a positive way in my curriculum. I'm comfortable and welcomed at school. I'm confident and I'm challenged academically, and I'm empowered, which is actually a word in the Fargo Public Schools mission, to achieve my dreams and my goals and my full potential. And also that I see my place as well as my responsibility in the community. So that's really how we would define what equity is. So let's just take a look at the how. Everybody who does equity work has a theory of change. And so if you take a look at this how on the slide, I want you to think of a system. So everyone who's listening here tonight, think of a system, an HR system, an accounting system, the circulatory system, music as a system, the law as a system. Think of how a system works, right? Just think about that for a minute. And almost all systems have these 6 conditions. And when a system is working well, you keep running that system for who it's working for. You wouldn't write a prescription for somebody whose heart was working well in a circulatory system. But if it wasn't working well, you would figure out, what does that person need in order for me to help create an equitable life outcome? And that's sort of what we see going on here. So if you take a look at these layers, this top one is structural change. This is what most people see. Like, what's your work on policy and practices? And where are we spending money on whom, where? Those are important structural things. The second one is harder to see, but you can kind of see it. Relationships and connections. Do we feel linked to our children? Do they feel linked to us as educators? And how do the power dynamics work? Who gets to make the decisions? Whose voice is heard? And then whose voice haven't we heard yet? And then the transformative change really comes out through mental models. So what mental models are the way I think about the world when it's working right. And like I said about the circulatory system or music that's written well, when it's working, you don't need to change it because it's working for those folks, right? But when it's not working, then some changes need to be made. And this is where people can get just a little bit lost on equity, because they might see equity, if you follow that arrow over, as a scarcity game. If that group wins, my group loses. If we add some curriculum pieces, then my group's going to suffer. And at least here in Fargo Public, that's the opposite of equity. It's the exact opposite. When I say all, I mean all students. And so we want to improve outcomes for all kids to meet the mission. And so what that means is we have to figure out what is the system of services that's holding a problem in place. If our graduation for a certain group isn't as high as it should be, then we know graduation is working well for some kids, that's great. But for those it's not working for, what system of supports do we put in to make certain that those kids get to graduate too? So again, on that last one, sometimes there's fear that if you improve equity, it's a win-lose game. If you improve for one group, it's worse for others. But as I said, that's the opposite of equity. A big piece of equity is safety, and the more you invest so that people can graduate and meet the mission, which is to achieve excellence by empowering all to succeed. When all kids succeed, then all kids are in a position of choice for career, for post-secondary education, and for community life. And when you're committed to educating all students so they can graduate and feed themselves and those they love, you have done a benefit for that student. But you've also done a benefit for that family. But you've also done a benefit for that neighborhood. And you've also done a benefit for that community. Because when people can feed themselves and those they love, they can maintain their home. You have fewer blighted properties. They can invest in community solutions. You have more wisdom coming into solving complex problems. And communities become healthier. But you also have citizens who are paying income tax and property tax and reinvesting in kind of that community, that community good. So we all win when kids graduate and are ready to go out in the world. That's sort of what the work is in equity. So I just want to talk about this for a little bit longer. We know that some change is needed if we have some groups who aren't represented in the mission. And when we know that change needs to happen, like I said, you wouldn't keep arguing a court case continually in the same manner if you lost. You wouldn't keep writing prescriptions if people didn't get better. You wouldn't keep crafting music in a way that was unpleasant. We wouldn't run school budgets in a way where they didn't balance. So we make those kind of corrections, and when we do, everybody benefits. So that's our theory, and then I'll just talk you through what you see on the screen. It's a little hot under the mask, so I'm going to catch up here. When I think about the work that's done out of my shop, it is, as I said, integrated with everybody on the teaching learning team, and these are really the 6 gears that I think my work is involved in. These are system gears, right? Or you might call them buckets, but I like to call them gears because they sort of work like this. When one turns, the other one turns. And this is how we get system improvement to happen. So let's just talk about each of those gears. I'll do a short summary of what they are, of the work done this year and the work for next year. And again, I'll do it by examples. So the first gear is to grow even greater skills in improving all student outcomes. And when we need to grow professional skills, because if we didn't do that, we'd have to assume people aren't trying hard enough. And I can tell you this, the educators I've met in this system, this is not an issue of lack of effort, and particularly not in this year. I think miracles have been pulled off, in fact. So we need to grow professional skill. Why? Because if we already had solutions to sticky problems, we would have applied them. I began with central office leaders and building leaders. In every best practice equity work, you always begin with leadership because leaders define culture, sub-leaders define subculture. That might sound a little bit arrogant in some ways, but you won't find a leader here in this system, I don't believe, who would tell you that they're the most important ones in this system. We aren't. The most important work is done at the classroom level, but in order to keep the idea of continuous improvement, we have to make sure leaders can do that minute by minute in their schools. So what did we do? We did a little bit of a applied Myers-Briggs, something called the 5 voices. Our leaders got to know themselves, to lead themselves. We followed that up with the intercultural development inventory. And what that did was provide a measure of our intercultural capacity. Now remember, again, intercultural capacity includes ideas of race, ethnicity, but it includes more. How you think about disability, how you think about boys as well as girls in certain classes. And then we did some training around that. We also offered sessions for our teaching staff around bias and how to recognize it. So next year, what might we do? We're going to extend that training. My hope is to school leadership teams using the available time that we have. The second gear is to continuously improve our curriculum instruction and resources. This year, we employed the district's policy on looking at curriculum when parents, we use the word challenge, but I think a fair word is questioned. We had some examples where music, for example, one song was not respectful of Native culture. And so someone inquired about that, and using the school's policy and a rubric, that song was pulled. On the other hand, another challenge was made regarding a story, and the team, upon studying that story, decided that it was appropriate and could stay. We did building walkthroughs, and what we discovered was that we definitely have classroom libraries that some are in really good shape and some aren't. These are libraries that teachers have perhaps funded on their own or had donations to. And we want our kids to be able to see themselves in the curriculum, remember that. So one of the things that, under Missy Eidsness's leadership, we have now the idea on the table, can we build out more culturally responsive classroom libraries? And so that would be our goal next year. In addition to classroom libraries, we want to make certain we have units for including Hispanic History Month and Native American Heritage Month. We've done some work on that already. Black History Month. And those really supplement the existing Western European history that we have in our schools. So it adds to the knowledge pool, it doesn't take away. And I think that's really important because as kids grow up, they're going to work together out there in society. And when they know one another, it's easier to collaborate as adults. The third item, deepen community engagement. A number of things to mention there, but I don't want to talk longer than Doug Andring did once. So I'm going to tell you that we had a request that we develop a parent equity advisory committee for education. We've done that. They're up and running. They will help guide my work and oversee my work as well. The Fargo Youth Commission allowed me to team with them on a valley-wide survey, really, of racism and mental health strife that students may feel. They've presented to the city, and they'll present to principals. We got engaged with the Family Partnership Project. We had a board member, we had students, number of community members, parents, and we really learned how do you include parent voice when you're solving problems of practice. And so next year, we want to extend that work with the larger community, making certain we're hearing from parents, such as our new Americans, and using forums to get feedback. I'll go around the clock to policy, procedures, and legislation. We trained well over 2,000 staff, over 2,300 staff on anti-harassment and non-discrimination according to North Dakota Century Code. We did a naming and renaming policy, Dakota High, as a result of that. Did some written testimony on some legislation. So next year, we want to work on discipline, attendance, and dress code with constituent groups to make certain we're hearing from them and making certain our policy is student-friendly and it adds to the safety and calmness of the environment. One thing I skipped, I wanted to mention, Missy Eidsness helped us with the Roots to Rise program where UND is actually in the school and recruiting students from underrepresented categories to go into the medical field, so we have enough doctors in our community, and I think that's exciting. So there was a definite effort to get BIPOC and students with socioeconomic struggles into that program. That's off and running. In terms of increasing graduation rates, again, students need to be in a position of choice. We want them to graduate choice-ready regarding the career they want and be able to go to college or the military or the workforce if they want, and to add to the community, because I believe strongly equity work is about raising people up into a position of choice so they can feed themselves or those they love. The value of a high school diploma is at least $9,000 a year versus not having a diploma. And so graduating kids is a difference of, more than $250,000 in lifetime earnings. So what have we done? In my portfolio, I hold Indian Ed and homeless. And we've done some monitoring of seniors' progress using Indian Ed dollars to help assist Native American senior students to graduation. We wrote a grant for the Building Assets Reducing Risks program. At Fargo South, we know if kids can get off to a good start in 9th and 10th grade, they're likely to graduate. So next year, we're going to implement that program. Another thing we're going to do is run an attendance campaign. Attendance is an access issue. Kids have to be able to get to school in order to learn and do well. And we really want to push hard on reducing our chronic absenteeism. And then finally, to diversify the teaching workforce. When you have a mixed group of educators from the various categories I mentioned, your team is so much stronger and you tend to outproduce a monocultural team. That's true in business, it's true in education. So this year, my colleague Denise Jonas has worked to kind of find our own, grow our own right here out of the school. And then Dr. Gross and Dr. Jonas are running the Future Fargo program, excuse me, and I'm leaning in on that. Next year, Mr. Andring and I have already talked about how we're going to work through an HR lens on an equity statement, making certain our positions are advertised more widely, and making certain that our, help me out with the document, our, thank you, our search committee manual is understood and employed by people who serve on search committees. So those are just some examples of what's been going on in my shop. I'll certainly stand for any questions, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Tamara. Wonderful information. My goodness, in the short amount of time you've been here, the impact that you've had. Robin, you had your hand up.
Thank you. Dr. Usselman, thank you for committing what I know of your life to helping children succeed and become citizens that can be proud of their lives and contributing to society. It really struck me when you said that your efforts will add to opportunities and understanding, but not take away from others. I would also thank you for explaining inclusion and equity, because all of a sudden I'm finding in some constituencies that these are bad words. Mm-hmm. And that confuses me, but I think it confuses them too. Mm-hmm. So all the more reason to get out there and educate about your wonderful work. I think it is positive by all means, and I am hoping that we can encourage some dialogue around those terms. Yeah. Hoping that we can talk about, you talked about community feedback teams. Yeah. I would encourage us to welcome and invite those that might be dubious of those terms. Mm-hmm. So we can engage in some dialogue, because I think there's some education that is missing, and through nobody's fault. It's not anybody's fault, but let's just learn, get in front of this. There are some terms that I've never heard of critical race theory before a month ago within some parent groups, and some of these terms they are flagging as far as this is critical race theory, and apparently that's not a good thing as it's termed. I know that's a curriculum specific item, so I'll stop there, but I think education and getting out in front of this and working with our families to include others is so important. So thank you for your work, and if you are looking for people to be on some of those committees, I've had a handful of constituents that have contacted me that are not particularly confident in the words inclusion and equity, yeah. And I would expect that they would want to be on your committee.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that input. I certainly know what critical race theory is. I couldn't pass the quiz on it tonight, though, in case you're going to ask. Critical race theory isn't taught in our school system, and certainly is something that if people are asking you about, they're curious about. But I'd be happy to meet with anybody to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion and what it means, which is let's get parity in outcomes. Let's ensure that we meet the mission through continuous improvement, that all students will be empowered in ways that they need in order to graduate and, again, feed themselves and those they love. Mm-hmm.
Seth?
Thank you, Dr. Uselman. I thought it was very interesting, your explanation of how this has a ripple effect in communities and people's homes and people's communities and cities. And I don't have to tell you how important I think your work is, and I think that you're right in that, and that this work can have a positive ripple effect throughout our entire community. I'm really happy that you're a part of FPS, and I'm really excited to see what the future holds. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Again, I think the number one thing you can do for safety, the absolute number one thing you can do for safety is to build community, give people a voice, get them involved, whether they come in with fears, like you said, Ms. Nelson, and they want to talk about what this is and isn't, and whether it's people who right now aren't achieving the outcomes that we want, and we need to hear what it is that are barriers from their perspective and how we can get better. So thank you for that. Equity is all our work. Yeah, it's all of ours, collectively. Anybody else?
Dr. Gandhi?
First off, just want to commend Dr. Uselman. Definitely a lot of work that's happened in this last year, and a lot more work to come in our district as well. I think anyone in our district office or school leadership will tell you that Dr. Uselman is fast and furious and unapologetic, because that's about student outcomes, and ultimately that's what happens when you hire a former superintendent as well. So, but I also want to let board members know that words matter, right? And so I appreciate the question on critical race theory, because clearly it's gotten a lot of attention, not only in our community, but in school districts nationwide. And it's important to know what critical race theory is and what it isn't, and then what equity work is and what equity work isn't as well. What we focus on is equity, and that is recognizing that there are structures that lead to marginalizations of students, but that's always gonna be a structure. There's no school district, to my knowledge, there's no public school district in the nation that has 100% graduation and 100% of their students making at least 1 year of growth on every assessment. If there was, I would hope they read a book, and then we could replicate it across the system. But there's just so much of what we do that involves a human element, and teaching and learning is so much about relationships that unfortunately, no, you can't universally design a system to meet the individual needs of every learner. So every year, equity needs to be a practice and a philosophy that we look back on. Who did we serve and who we didn't, and what are we going to do differently to close that gap? And it might be a group of students based on race this year, but it might be a group of students based on gender identity in 20 years, or it might be a different group. And that's just part of the continuous improvement process. And it starts with common language. And one thing that I do want board members to know, especially as you get questions around what does our equity work look like, what does critical race theory, and why is it not in our schools, and how are the two separated, is if you do go to our public website and you go to department, so then you click on equity and inclusion, Dr. Uselman's done a great job of developing an equity statement for Fargo Public Schools. This is what our work is. This is what it looks like. This is what we expect out of our students and our staff. But then you'll also see an equity action plan. What are we going to engage in over the next 5 years, and what are those concrete, tangible things? So that's probably a resource that I would make sure that just board members are aware of as you engage in this conversation with the community as well.
Tracy?
I just wanted to thank you for offering up the leadership training to the board members. I did the 5 Voices training and then the subsequent learning, and I learned a lot about myself, and it's something I've quoted to others and encouraged to others. So thank you for including us on that.
Yeah, thank you for taking part in it. And thank you, Dr. Gandhi, for helping to define what I meant by parity. I think parity is what I'm saying. I have a little bit of a Finnish accent here. Yes, but we want outcomes for all kids, all of them. Every one of them is somebody's child. And then a future grown-up probably in our community. Thank you. Thank you for all you do. I appreciate you listening as I tried to talk through my mask tonight.
Thanks for being here. The next item is on the accreditation report. It's memo 126. Dr. Gandhi?
Good evening, board members. This is more of an exciting presentation, I think. As most of you know, that this year marked one of our outside external review process through our accreditation agency, the agency that is now known as Cognia, formerly known as Advance Ed. This year, Fargo Public Schools participated in the external review process from March 29th to April 1st. Not only did we get accredited without fail, but we also were highly commended in several areas. Part of the continuous improvement process, as I kind of just alluded to in my previous statements as well, is that recognizing that there's always going to be work that we need to do, and there's always going to be work that we're exceeding. So how do we create a system in which we're continuing to foster our best practices and then working on improving those that could be altered to improve student outcomes? So findings from our accreditation, from the accreditation team, they use a I3 rubric, meaning they break down findings by impact, what can be improved upon, or what are things that have been initiated in the district and then they can be continued as well. So our impact findings included two things. First was that district and building leaders are committed to educating the whole child, and that really is a reflection of our focus around social emotional learning in our school district and what we want to do to understand that that learning takes more than just the academic content and mastery of just what's happened in a standards-based curriculum. For those of you that were on the board, you know that last year, part of our State of the Schools address and our public focus group focused on social emotional learning and creating a 5-year multi-tier system of support intervention plan that was focused not on the academics. We already have a MTSS plan, but it was an MTSS-B plan. And what that includes is our expectations for all schools, all 23 schools in Fargo Public Schools, elementary, middle, and high school, including our alternative schools, and what those expectations are. So that is within the next 5 years, we expect all those schools to be trained in trauma-informed practices. We expect all those schools to be engaging in restorative practices to support social emotional learning, and we expect all those schools to be also embedding social emotional curriculum in one way, shape, or form into the academic content as well, because we know that that's so important. Another impact finding for the district is actually a commendation to all of you. As you know, board members were part of the interview process as well. And one of the findings that was called out by the external reviewers was that the governance model used in Fargo Public Schools supports strategic and progressive actions to promote student success. I think, to me, in terms of our debrief with the cognitive evaluators, I think that's a result of two things. One is recognition that we have a strong governance model. It is our hybrid between a policy and covariance governance model based off Carver, and it works for us. I think the two things that they like is that one is that there's a delineation between what is operational and what is the board's function as well. It provides that clear structure. It allows us to work as a team and move forward. So I want to commend all the board members on that. But I think the second piece that the external committee recognized as well, and what makes our district really unique, is that the board aligned all of the result policies to all the strategic initiatives. We look at student achievement, but we also look at all the operational aspects that are part of our strategic plan, and that alignment is something that creates a strong governance and leadership within our district as well. So I wanted to make sure that the board members were aware of that as well. The improved finding was that while professional development is occurring at the district and building levels in abundance, there is no formal process to gauge the impact it's having on instructional delivery and student achievement. I would agree with that finding as well. We have probably one of the most complex and robust teach-to-learn system with a wide variety of PD. We are going to continue to improve upon this finding and make sure that moving forward, how do we take the PD that we're doing and then be able to translate that into the outcomes it has on students to recognize which PD is working and should be replicated within our district versus what it isn't. Our focus is to provide as much PD opportunity as we can. We also know that along with providing that opportunity for teachers and all of our staff, we also have to go back and do a programmatic evaluation on the professional development we offer. So that's going to be something that we're going to continue to work and focus on as a district. And then the last thing was the initiate finding, and this is really kind of recognition of our teaching and learning team and our data analysis team. As you know, Stephen DeRoe has overseen and managed a lot of our hub, but we are really recognized that we are really rich in data, and the utilization of the hub is unique for our district and allows for data analysis that's commonly not seen in the district. But they also wanted to recognize that being that data rich is one thing. Now it's our time to transition to data analysis. We probably have more data accessible at our fingertips for all staff members in our district because of the hub, but now what are we going to do with that data? And I think that's part of moving forward. I think Tamara alluded to that a little bit today as well. Actually, Tamara's working with Stephen DeRoe to develop an equity dashboard that will be able to take a look at just a snapshot of our data and analyze it in different ways through different lens about where are we seeing underrepresentation across parity, disparity, representation of our student populations, and then address those with some concrete strategies. So that's going to be something that we focus on. It's going to be more important, more than ever, going into next year, coming back from COVID, knowing that the different learning environments this past year probably had a different impact on a wide variety of learners. So those are just some of the things that were found in the accreditation report. You have a full copy of the report at your tables and available to you as well. This will also be shared. Our communications team is working on sharing that with the general public. We'll be on our website as well, so we'll be doing that. Overall, districts get a score on the Cognia report, and I'm going to say this a little bit tongue-in-cheek. The external reviewers knew that I had an internal score to beat, and that was the score of my wife's school district, because they were evaluated last year, and we did do that, so I am proud of that, and I will suffer for that when I go home later today for that superintendent who did a great job. But we were given an IEQ score, which is their score that they do, and it's the benchmark on how they assess you through your external evaluation, of 333.71. And when you compare the 5-year IEQ range to districts that are our size, our demographic, our composition, normally where districts fall in that external rating is 278.34 to 283.33. So we knocked it out of the water. And I truly do believe, and I'm a little bit biased here, that if this wasn't a COVID year and they actually got to be in our classrooms versus virtually visiting with them, they would have even seen some more powerful practices in what they did. And that is just a pure reflection of our staff who continue to work tremendously hard and are dedicated to our students. I get to sit here today and brag about our accreditation, but it's really bragging about our staff, because they're the ones that are doing all the hard work, and we're just incredibly proud of them. So wanted to review that information. You have the full report to read at your leisure as well, but just some great things happening in Fargo Public Schools, with also some great work that we know that's been identified that we have to do to continue improving student outcomes, which we're committed to doing.
Fantastic. Anyone have any questions or comments? A lot of good information to read through, and some challenges ahead to help improve the district. So it's great. Thanks everyone too, for board members for participating, taking the time to participate in that review. Item C is the FEA report, and I did receive a call from Kim Belgard. She's the new president of the FEA. She was not sure, she called me yesterday, and so she was not sure if she was going to be able to be here today due to, I think, another personal commitment. But we did have a short conversation, and it was good to hear from her. Superintendent's report is next. Dr. Gandhi.
Sure. I just wanted to kind of inform the board about a recent development that we found later today that kind of led to an administrative decision, but I want to be just very transparent with the board as well. Tomorrow, we do have to call a early dismissal at 3 of our campuses, at Kennedy Elementary School, Centennial Elementary School, and Discovery Middle School. We found out late in the afternoon today that due to the funeral for the West Fargo police officer that unfortunately passed, the timing of the funeral and then the procession afterwards is going to lead to the city of Fargo closing down some roads that would directly impact dismissal at those buildings. During the time of the procession, they're not going to allow for any vehicle or pedestrian traffic that impacts some of our students in their direct route to home. There would be no other opportunity besides just to wait, and it would be a guessing game a little bit about when it's going to end. It was shared with us that Officer Mosier's processional lasted about 45 minutes, and this could significantly impact the after-school piece. So for those 3 schools, we had to make a last-minute decision today to go through an early dismissal process to make sure that every student has an opportunity to go home as well at the right time before those road closures occur. So wanted to share that.
Thank you. On to the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
Is there a second? There's a motion by Jim, a second by Seth for approval of the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. The business items, award of proposal for the health insurance provider, memo 128 is the first item. Let's see, that comes to us from the Health Insurance Committee. Karen Hallerung is the chair. And do we have, Karen, are you here to present to us? All right. All right, welcome.
Thank you.
Good evening, Board and President. Karen Hallerung, Chair with the Health Insurance Committee. I'm here to present the Board recommendation for our health insurance be awarded to health partners based on the findings we had received from Gallagher and the request for proposals that were received. And the committee went through over a course of a couple days looking at data and analysis and determining that our best benefit would be health partners. So as you can see by the board memo and the information that's included in it, that is what we are recommending.
Is there a motion to get us started? Jim?
Yeah, I'll make a motion on behalf of the Health Insurance Committee. I'd move that we approve the Health Insurance Committee recommendation and authorize administration to enter into a 3-year contract agreement for self-insured group medical insurance services with health partners to be effective January 1 of 2022.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, a second by Dr. Newman. Any discussion? Jim?
I first of all want to give a big shout out to the Health Insurance Committee because as Karen indicated, they met a few times. I would say quite a few times, and really went through a pretty diligent process. At the end of the day, after the RFP went out, and obviously Brian from Gallagher and Associates really coordinated that process for us. We had 3 companies that came back with a complete package for us to look at. So all 3 of those came in and presented. They were each given, about an hour. Some took a little more. The committee had the opportunity to ask questions, really see what each of those firms thought they could bring to the table. All 3 of them, quite frankly, really offered very comparable health insurance to our employees. The question comes, what are they going to do to help us try to manage claims going forward? Because that's probably the most critical thing for the financial stability of this plan. And after looking at all 3 of them, Health Partners had the components that we use today with Blue Cross Blue Shield for some of that patient management, but also had some new tools that really we have not had available to our employees. And from a pricing standpoint, it's really hard to say which of these will ultimately produce the lowest cost for the district. Part of it is the administration cost. Those are easy to calculate, and Brian and Gallagher put those all together for us quite nicely. And quite frankly, both of the other 2 companies outside of Blue Cross Blue Shield that bid came in with lower admin costs than Blue Cross Blue Shield. But admin is a small chunk of what we pay. Claims are the bulk of it. And that's where it gets a little bit more gray. Each of these insurance carriers negotiates pricing with all of the medical providers in our region. And by the very nature, for years and years, Blue Cross Blue Shield has had the vast number of the population insured, so they're the big gorilla in the room when it comes to negotiating prices with carriers. Health Partners, who the committee is recommending, has been making fairly major strides at getting business in this marketplace. Moorhead Public Schools has been using them, I want to say for 4 years, 6 years, and have had great success. They actually have a higher percentage of the prescription drugs going on the formulary list in Moorhead than we currently have in Fargo. So the committee looked at everything and said, you know, the admin costs are a little less with Health Partners. Claims, we're going to see how they really shake out. Hopefully they'll be comparable, maybe a little less. Quite frankly, I think they'll end up being more, but I think they'd be more with Blue Cross Blue Shield because medical inflation just exists. Now, since the committee made their decision. We have had, to the best of my knowledge, and there could be more than this, 3 separate communications to people in this district from Blue Cross Blue Shield wanting to revisit the RFP process, wanting to rebid, I guess, what they gave us. Frankly, I'm a little uncomfortable with that whole concept. The idea of an RFP is, here's what we want, give us your best result, and we'll compare it to the rest of the people that are bidding. For us to get all the data, see where everybody's at, and then tell everybody, let's do it again, flies in the face of actually what the RFP process is all about. So while I can appreciate Blue Cross Blue Shield wanting to keep our business, and quite frankly, I think a fair number of people on the committee really needed to see something that would convince us to move away from Blue Cross Blue Shield. Because to the best of my ability, that's the only health carrier the district's ever had. Certainly in my lifetime at this district. But all things being said, when we looked at it all, we thought the tools that they're gonna bring in with health partners to help our employees manage their own health consuming, bring some new things to the mix that we haven't had before. We also like the way their prescription rebate system works, as opposed to waiting until the end of the year to see what you might get back. They're committing to send monthly checks to our HR, or actually to Jackie, probably you get the check. And then they'll square up at the end of about 14 or 16 months on where the rebates really come in. And if they're successful on moving more of our people to formulary drugs, we'll actually get less rebates, but we'll have less in total claims. Because we have some specialty drugs, quite frankly, a handful of employees, not their fault, just their medical condition, their prescription drugs represent a disproportionate amount of our entire prescription bill. And if we can get those claims managed better, that hopefully in the long term will lower the rate of increase that we're seeing going forward. I don't want anybody on the board to think that this decision lowered our costs for healthcare. It did not. I'm pretty sure when we see the budget for next year come forward, we'll see an increase in the district's expense for health insurance. I think we'll see premiums probably in the next meeting or so presented to the board for consideration. So this isn't necessarily about instantly saving money. This is about hopefully finding a better provider that can help us manage the health needs of our employees. And quite frankly, one of the thoughts of the committee, and it really kind of got re-emphasized to me when I saw Blue Cross Blue Shield emailing, could we rebid, is the committee has not really felt over time that Blue Cross Blue Shield has always been as honest and transparent as they maybe should be. And perhaps this will bring them to the table with a more earnest desire to get us their best offer the first time, rather than losing in an RFP and then wanting to renegotiate the pricing. So the committee as a whole, and I agree with them wholeheartedly, a board member doesn't have a vote on it, unanimously voted for health partners. And I do believe the board should take their recommendation.
Robin?
I would, I'm a semantics person. I would say that one might not be better. One health insurance provider might not be better than the other, but I think there are certain providers that fit the district's needs at different times. And so I want to be careful on how we word that, but I will support this vote.
Seth?
A couple of questions. It looks to me like what we're offering our employees is pretty much virtually exactly the same. There's just a couple, 2 things in there I think I see that are different, and what does that do for our employees? Then the one I see is underneath the classic blue versus the one on the right under health partners, it'd be the $40 copay visit and 20% coinsurance and no deductible versus it's printed in red, the first 3 visits, 3, then $20 copay per visit. What is that? Is it?
It's actually a better benefit that you have the opportunity
It is?
to get those first services.
We'll have you come to the microphone and then, yeah, we just want to make sure that that we're all able to hear, so. Jackie, go ahead, please make an introduction.
This is Brian Owen, and he is with Gallagher, so our benefits consultant, and he was kind enough to come tonight to answer any questions that you may have, as he's more knowledgeable on the specifics than many of us are.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you, Board, for having me. Yes, it's just a change in the benefit. It actually would be an enhancement for participants
Okay.
relative to that. But the goal of the RFP, even though changing health insurance providers per se from the administrative standpoint, was to match the benefits as apples to apples as possible. And I think we achieved that through the RFP process.
Okay. And then the only other difference that I see is on the top line with the deductible and the copay, the $40 copay. What is that?
I don't have that in front of me, Tiffany.
I'm not sure, is this it right here?
No. Oh, that's on the benefits. I don't have that right in front of me. I'm sorry. The benefit summary?
Oh, it's
Oh,
on this sheet right here. It's just the top line, where the classic blue would coincide with the other plan. There's an added $40 copay there, and I'm just wondering what that means.
What page is it on, Seth? Just so that we can make sure.
Not numbered.
They're not
so
numbered.
sorry.
It's just the
Yeah, I'm
Fargo
gonna grab my
Public Schools
glasses,
chart.
being that,
Yeah, it's pretty small. I have 20/20 and I'm struggling with it.
Okay.
yeah, if you look under the health partners, really the only difference is relative to the retail visits. So it's actually, those are going to more of an e-visit or retail clinic. The cost is actually less for participants than it would be, again, if you're under the current Blue Cross Blue Shield plan. So again, it's an enhancement to the program.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
Yep.
Jennifer.
Thank you. As long as you're up there, can I ask you a question? So under employer liability, cost of Blue Cross Blue Shield to the district versus the new versus health partners. Can you just kind of walk us through that?
Are we on?
Oops, hang on. I went down to Sanford. I got to go back up. They compare current versus
Yeah.
the proposal. Here's health partners.
Yeah, so.
So under employer liability.
So when you look at employer liability, basically what we're looking at is the overall cost of the program, including fixed costs, stop loss, and projected claims. Sometimes you have to be careful how you focus on that, because from an underwriting perspective, the bulk, as Jim had alluded to, were in claims. These are projection of claims based on last 2 years of analytics. This sets your aggregate limit in terms of the most that you would have to pay. But as you move forward, you're going to pay the claims as you go forward. So really the employer liability aspect, if you look at that, as health partners, employer liability is actually less than Blue Cross Blue Shield. But again, most of the times for a district to hit the aggregate is going to be, you're going to have an unbelievably bad year with claims going up to that stop loss level of the 200,000. And we have not seen that in the last number of years for the district.
Thank you. And if I may just follow up, would that be very similar in terms of the expectations for cost to employee then as well?
That is an expectation that we met last week, and I don't know when that is going to be presented, so.
I believe we will have the premium recommendation come at the June 8th meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions? Nikki?
Did I understand correctly that this would be for a 3-year agreement? And sorry.
Yes, technically it's a 3-year contract, but we have the ability at the end of year 1 to end it if we are not happy. But we asked for a 3-year commitment on the admin costs, which they were willing to do.
Okay, and that ties to my question, is that in year 2 and year 3, how much change are we anticipating seeing? Is this going to hold steady for 3 years if we go for 3 years?
I would fully expect we'll probably have a premium increase each and every year going forward, unless for some reason Tracy can get all of her coworkers to decide to take a pay cut. Which I'm kidding, Tracy, I don't expect that.
The aspect of the 3-year contract really focuses on the fixed cost, as Jim talked about. So we have guarantees on the administrative fee, the stop loss, some of the rebates and others. As you know, in a self-funded medical plan, 85 to 90% of your costs are in claims. That's very fluid as it works through. But we have ties to rate caps of only certain dollar increases in those fixed costs for the next 3 years.
Okay, and where I'm going with that, and I don't mean any offense, I don't mean anything negative, but I have seen companies move from Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then in years 2 or years 3, by the time that they're done with that, they're saying, "God, we'd pay more, just get us back to where we were." And it wasn't necessarily Health Partners, so please don't take offense to that. I'm just looking down the road.
Right.
And I don't want us to make a decision that, yep, we're gonna jump because, yep, this, all things equal, and then these things are good. But yet, we get a year or 2 or 3 down the line and discover we really probably should have stayed put. I guess that's all I want to throw out there.
If I could address that quickly, one of the things that we did is our due diligence as relates to references. So for example, Moorhead now is going upwards on their 4th contract with Health Partners. So they're going into their 7th and 8th year. And specifically with HP, we have one district that's been with them for 40 years, others that have been for 20. So you don't see a lot of change as it relates to that. They seem to be very fair and they're reasonable in their renewal process as it relates to that. So we actually have a little bit more flexibility as it relates to that. So again, knowing that we have to 3 years, we will, I can't promise anything after 3 years, but we will reevaluate to see what happens after that.
Thank you.
Robin?
Pass.
Okay. Any other questions? Jennifer?
I'm going to ask one to build on that in terms of accessibility or coverage of Health Partners. So even if costs can remain similar, what about access? Do they have the same? I believe like Blue Cross Blue Shield has 80+% of the providers in terms of coverage. Would Health Partners be similar?
Great question. We did have that part of our the analytics, that we not only looked at formulary disruption, we looked at provider disruption, we looked at discounts. We did a very detailed discount analysis because we know that's a big portion of the cost. But to your point relative to the provider, I think it was 97 or 98% of claims that were processed were from in-network providers within Health Partners. Obviously, Sanford and Essentia are the 2 largest here, and they obviously are in their network.
Thank you.
Another question, Nikki?
Yeah, a new question, if I may. What about for out-of-network providers? What if someone here has a specialty and needs to be seen at, say, Children's or seen at Mayo? How does that compare
Great
with Health
question.
Partners?
So where Blue Cross has we'll call their Blue Card system, so they have on a national basis. Health Partners is regional, but they also align themselves with Cigna on a national basis. So you have Mayo, you have Children's, you have I think it's the 2nd largest national PPO network per provider organization. So if you happen to be traveling in Texas, if you have kids in California, Wisconsin, or Minnesota, they have provider access just like everyone else. If someone happens to go outside the network, you still you have a higher copay or coinsurance, but you still have coverage there as well. But on a national basis, you do have a very deep provider network.
Robin?
One closing statement. I think it's good to state that you're the consultant.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever you recommend, Health Partners wouldn't have any benefit to you over choosing any others.
Mm-mm.
So I
No,
think that's
my
important to
commitment
state.
is to the district. So we have business with Health Partners, we have business with Medica, we have business with Blue Cross, our preferred one. We provided all the analytics, I answered questions, and then the committee had voted at that time. But yes, we have no additional relationship with Health Partners other than another provider that we work with.
Thank you to you for your work, and thank you to the committee for their work.
You're welcome, thank you.
All right, thank you, everyone, for the discussion and the questions. Jolynn, who is, I forgot to mention, is here tonight because Anne Marie is not able to be here. Would you please call the roll, and thank you for being here.
You're welcome. Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Item B is the 2021 Summer School Policy Memo 129. Dr. Gandhi, would you like to introduce?
Sure, thank you. You have a very long and complex board memo regarding this policy, but I will just kind of break it down to you as quickly as I can. So summer school planning begins in December and takes full steam in January of every year. During that time, this past year, we had no idea where we were going to be with COVID-19 or our instructional model, so we thought the best option was to plan a summer school that would allow for virtual instruction, allow for in-person instruction, and allow for hybrid instruction. To do all three at that time, the only opportunity available to us was to submit an innovation waiver with the state so we could use those instructional modalities, because we were working under the premise at that time that the governor's executive order was going to naturally expire at the end of June. So we would need this for July. At that time, I had reached out to DPI and they said, yep, that makes sense. Go ahead and submit the waiver. So that happened, and then the world happened between February and May, where things have drastically changed with COVID, and our legislative session also happened. And during our legislative session, school districts can now be given the authority to provide virtual instruction with the adoption of a board policy. However, that board policy has to follow the administrative rules created by the Department of Public Instruction. So on May 15th, I believe, Dr. Gross received a call from DPI that said, we're rejecting your waiver. And at this time, also the governor's executive order, which is supposed to expire at the end of June, was lifted at the end of April. Said, we are rejecting your waiver because the innovation waiver is no longer the right avenue. DPI then met with Dr. Gross and myself and David Berkman, who oversees our summer school program, and said, what you're doing in concept is right, because at that point we had said, okay, if we just cancel virtual instruction, then we are impacting all the students that have already registered for that summer school. And DPI said, no, we want you to provide that opportunity for kids if they want it, but the authority now lies in the legislative bill that was passed, which is House Bill 1388. Now that gets a little bit trickier, because House Bill 1388 says, in order to provide virtual instruction, the board has to adopt a policy, and the policy has to be aligned to the administrative rules set by the Department of Public Instruction. Well, the Department of Public Instruction has not defined those administrative rules yet. I'm actually on the committee to work on those administrative rules statewide, and there's no intention of doing that until January 1st of this year, because we have to post the administrative rules, we have to go through legal and public comment, so that's not going to happen. So Superintendent Baszler and this is not our district, this is us, Mandan, Williston, West Fargo have passed a bill, their board passed a resolution last night as well. We're all going through the same thing. So they said what their recommendation to the board is to adopt a policy that allows us to provide virtual instruction for this summer school, and then have that policy automatically sunset once the administrative rules have been created by DPI, hopefully January 1st of 2022, and then we'll adopt a new policy that aligns with those administrative rules. What we did, so we just took that vague language, following Superintendent Baszler's guidance, created a virtual policy, or a policy that allows for virtual instruction, but I also extended it to this next school year, because although we don't plan on providing our own virtual academy in Fargo Public Schools next year, we do want to work with the North Dakota Center for Distance Ed for families that might have those extenuating circumstances to provide the opportunity for students in need that need that environment. So, and in the policy, I said this policy will sunset when the administrative rules have been created by DPI. However, it won't impact any students that are already enrolled this school year, because we don't want to penalize a kid for a bureaucratic policy change, right? So I think that's what this board memo does, and that's what I'm looking for. I do want to add that at 3:33 this afternoon, after this board memo was posted, Joe Kolosky from DPI said, just make sure that your board also approves the name and academy, the name of the academy and grade configurations. So my request to the board is that you read the memo as is, but you also add a line to the recommendation that says, administration will determine the name and grade configurations for the virtual academy. And then we'll be covered by what Superintendent Baser and DPI have asked us to do. Sorry, that's a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Robin, you had your hand up?
Yes, welcome to my world. Okay, I move that the Board of Education approve the Administrative Policy 4210, allowing virtual instruction in Fargo Public Schools for the time period outlined in the policy, and allow administration to determine the, help me out here, the name and the grade configuration.
Second.
Jolynn, do you have that down? Okay, does anyone have any questions? Jennifer?
Thank you. Yes, I have a few questions. So, Rupak, when you mentioned allowing for distance ed partnering, I'm wondering how that would then also align to House Bill 1388, because in there it says that at least 6 hours for high school students would be required to be in attendance. So I guess I should maybe back up, and my first question really is, I understand that the administrative policy from DPI isn't slated to be created until January, but how, when there's not one in existence, how does that fall in line with the Century Code then? I'm assuming that means just the directive from Basler is substituting for that policy, but is that legal? And then I have a couple follow-ups, but I'll let you start with that.
Great question. So in our first discussion on the virtual academy rules that I'm working on the statewide group, we've had that same conversation. I don't think the way the group is moving right now is a minute-for-minute substitution, but even if it was, and Dr. Gross and I know Mr. Berkman's not here, but they'll be able to talk to it, we are covering more minutes through the virtual model, so we're not gonna be short of any summer school hours because we're transitioning to a summer school minute. Attendance will be engaged, will be assessed through participation, because we're gonna have synchronous and asynchronous models along with the engagement and attendance requirements that we had when we were in hybrid or virtual academy, which was done through a demonstration of learning piece as well. So that's what we would use for this summer school model that's been developed as of now.
And you're saying those details fall within the state statute in terms of hours?
Correct, because yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and then if I may. So really then, even in the absence of not having an administrative policy from the state, I guess that was part of that question, but if I heard you correctly or saw you nod, getting direction from them counts in terms of the eyes of the law?
Yeah, yes, this was, again, like I said, this is not just our district, because every district wants to provide this opportunity. We have DPI's blessing on this. In fact, Superintendent Baser has been directly involved with talking about this with our district, but so has Joe Kolosky, who is, as I read his signature, the Office of School Approval and Opportunity. So they know we're having this discussion. In fact, they saw this board memo, and that's when they gave the feedback today, this afternoon. So this is all based on their guidance.
Okay, and then if I may ask my last.
Going to check just to see, does anyone else have any other questions before your last question?
Sure.
Anyone else? Okay, go ahead, Jennifer.
And I kind of started with this one, which was backwards, so thank you for answering those first. But the idea that it goes through January, can you help me understand why through January? You did mention distance education, but wouldn't we, my understanding of at least our high school students in participating in that doesn't require any sort of face-to-face or logging in, doing a FaceTime type virtual learning component. It's just really sort of self-directed. So how would that work?
This goes through January because in order to provide this opportunity in the fall, for even with our partnership with the North Dakota Center for Distance Ed, at least as of now, the guidance is going to be we have to create a virtual academy, give it a plant number, give it a number in Power School and STARS. And the only reason I have this policy going through the fall is because If we limit it to summer school, which is fine because that's a priority right now, I'd be coming back to you this fall and saying, can you adopt another policy? And then in January, I'd be saying, okay, that policy sunsets and can you adopt another one? So the 2-for-1 was just literally convenience. So the board members were not bringing back another policy. So why this goes through January is because we do assume that this fall, while Fargo Public Schools is not having an intention to develop their own virtual academy, if there are family or student situations in need where a virtual academy environment is determined and we're working on what that qualifies, then our intention is to partner with the North Dakota Center for Distance Ed and to be able to provide that. Now, without this policy's adoption going into the next school year, we would not be able to allow for, to get ADM to do that. So that's why this policy covers the next school year as well, while we're in this limbo avoiding the admin rules. Because if not, then we would just have to say, for families in our district, we don't have any virtual environment. They would then have to go the homeschool route to partner with the Center for Distance Ed. Allowing this policy allows us to work that out with them where they're in our district. We can still provide that environment and without them being a homeschool child.
Tracy, you indicated, excuse me, Nikki, you indicated you have a question.
Would like to call the question so we can move to the vote. Thank you.
All right, let's see here. We have
Second.
to- Okay, there's been a recommendation that we call the question, and it's been seconded, so we need to vote on that, and that would be a roll call vote, I believe. Jolynn?
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Benson,
No.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes. We will move on to voting on the motion. Jolynn, please call the roll.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
No.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Item C underneath business is something that was moved from the consent agenda, memo 127. I guess I just had a couple questions on that, and we, board members, maybe all of us, received some reaching out from some of the individuals that provide nursing services for our school district, sharing their experiences. So thanks to those folks for reaching out to us and helping us to just kind of understand some of their perspective on their service to the district. Just wondering about the suggestion here of moving into the 3-year contract. How are the individuals that are currently serving our district impacted? And
Rebecca?
are they not?
Can I make a motion, please? to
Oh, yes,
start this
please, go
discussion on the
ahead,
floor?
Robin.
I will move that we accept the FargoCast Public Health's proposal and authorize administration to enter into a 3-year contractual agreement for school nursing services effective July 1, 2021.
Second.
Thank you for taking care of that important part. I got ahead of myself since I was the one that made the request. Okay, so I posed the question, and Dr. Gandhi, go ahead.
Sure. So the current practice for Fargo Public Schools has been to, even currently prior to this approval, if should it happen, is we contract nursing services with FargoCast Public Health. What we have noticed in the past couple of years is that we have increased needs, whether it's through medication administration, diabetic needs as well. And we've tried to work with FargoCast Public Health as well to increase the in-person needs that we need for nursing services at all of our schools. The best example I can give you specifically is between that lunch hour, where we have a lot of high needs and there just haven't been enough nurses to staff all of our schools because they kind of rotate. So we decided to go through an RFP process, and FargoCast Public Health is still the bid that we're recommending to the board. They have in this proposal compared to previous increased some of their in-person capacity, but they also know that part of it's just recruiting and hiring, and who you have available to you. So their proposal actually includes a component where they might partner with another agency, such as maybe a Sanford or someone else, to provide a component of telehealth services. So Fargo CAS can provide the in-person, and then another agency, and based on what that scope of services look like, that might be an RFP process or something that we'd have to talk about. But I want the board to know that we're not limiting the nurses service to this. Their proposal is the in-person part, and then there's a potential partner of other parts, or another supplement. And then to your question, while I can't speak to the specifics because I know Missy's going to meet with them, this would be, I think, continuing and enhancing the in-person nursing services that we already have with Fargo CAS, so I don't have a direct impact, and Jackie's there too.
Okay, Jackie?
Yeah, I can maybe help a little bit on that. So there are employees of Fargo CAS Public Health, and in essence, we're sharing them. So we pay a portion of their salary and have them for a portion of the time, and their other, I'll take my glasses off, and the other part of the time, they're doing duties for Fargo CAS Public Health. I think some of the, in addition to being able to hire people, they're also an entity under the city, right? And so it's not that they can't just hire people, they have to hire them and factor them in, much like we would have to hire people and factor them into our budget. So I think that's been a little bit of some timing in the past, but their new proposal does include some expanded services, which we're grateful for, and I think will help us a lot fill in where we may have a few little holes yet.
Thank you for helping me better understand. Does anyone else have any questions? Again, I apologize for getting ahead of myself before a motion was made. Dr. Gandhi?
We recognized, or actually Mrs. Gap recognized, that inadvertently administration failed to put the price tag on the memo. So I will ask her to share that information so you know how much you are voting on.
So the first year of the contract, because of course every year they would hope to give their staff raises as well, would be $456,000 for 2022 school year. And then that's for kind of the regular nursing services. And then they also provide some more specialized services for special education students. And that would be very similar to the prior years. That's about $103,000. So but the services that they will be then providing for the general population, that is an increase of about $100,000 over the previous year for the additional work that they'll be doing for us.
Okay, I don't see any questions. I don't see any hands up. Jolynn, please call the roll.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
President Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Moving on to the agenda, and it's about 10 to 7 if we want to take a break, but I see there is an item on the agenda. Jim?
I'd like to move us into executive session for the purpose of negotiation strategy as permitted under North Dakota Century Code 44-04-19.1.
Is there a second?
Second.
Yeah, all in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? All right, motion passes, so we'll exit the room, take a little break, 5-minute break, be back at about 6:55. PM, we're back into our regular meeting. On item 8, board reports, committee liaison and correspondence reports. Dr. Newman, do you have anything?
I just did 2 interviews with the media. I attended the NDSBA Healthy Return to Learning team listening session, and then an NDSBA Lunch and Learn on policies. And for fun, I attended the Davies Addams Family production with my son on opening night. It was wonderful.
Seth, anything?
I was actually supposed to have a CTE meeting tonight. They changed it to tonight. I don't think they quite realized that I wouldn't be able to be there, but so I will have to get those minutes from Denise to see what they discussed. And I can't remember what day it was. Friday. I visited Lincoln Elementary for their walkathon and went outside and hung out with all the kids running and walking and having a good time in the heat. So it was quite enjoyable. Other than that, that's it.
Okay, Jennifer?
So I participated yesterday in the webinar, or seminar, I'm not sure which they call it, from Aspen Group, their monthly seminars that they offer. And yesterday it was on social and emotional learning and how basically board members participated in breakout sessions, in shared sort of practices, best practices in terms of how do you even measure success in that area. I know I took more notes, but I left them on my desk. And so I'm going off memory here, but if I do see any other pearls, I will bring them next time for you. But I did find it helpful to listen to, sort of how other districts really approach that. And it kind of ties back to some of the other things that Tamara was talking about earlier too. And it made me think of really our results policies and how those initiatives can, be measured through that as well in terms of what it is, how are we measuring the results of what we are doing in terms of outcomes, student outcomes. So it was a bit of a more challenging topic because they hadn't done before, so it was really an interesting conversation. That's it.
David?
Since our last meeting, I think the only thing I've participated in are negotiations and negotiations committee meetings, which seems to be enough.
Brian?
Nothing other than I get to watch the Davies work at the football field and the turf and that. It's quite the process they're doing.
Watch it right from your backyard, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, Nikki?
And I drive by that Davies Field every morning, and I'm amazed at all the work that they're doing. I don't have a whole lot. We've now completed our family engagement meetings. We had a Fargo team led by Dr. Uzelman. That was a great experience. Lots of fascinating ways to look at and think about things. I think we'll make some great strides here in Fargo. We certainly had commitment. We had the largest team in the state. And again, negotiations meetings and negotiations committee meetings.
All right, thank you everyone for sticking through tonight. The president's report is at your desk. We have the first graduation is May 27th, the GED graduation. Jennifer will be at Agassiz for that. Looks like we have homework that's going to be coming up due June 2nd, so watch for that from Anne Marie. And I know we're supposed to be gathering prizes for the picnic that we're going to be having at some point. I haven't heard yet where we're going to be able to have that, the picnic for our summer staff. So if we could just all keep that in mind and make sure that almost everyone that attends is able to walk away with something, that would be great. And I don't have anything else other than the business we've conducted tonight. So our next meeting is June 8th at 5:30 p.m. and we're adjourned.